There's a lot to talk about. I've been asked to give kind of a, what are the things I saw over the past few days? Put some context around it and see if we can get some discussion going, and maybe give some ideas for our traders on how to move forward over the next week or so. And there's certainly been a lot of stories, and a lot of it's fluff. I mean, sometimes I feel like it's I'm doing some kind of social media program with some of this stuff, because there's a lot of rumors, a lot of things floating around, a lot of hysteria going on in DC, some fun stuff, little legal challenges, and things that us DC aficionados can certainly get excited about. But let's see how we can turn that into some actionable thoughts and ideas. And I'm going to run through some of the things that have been on my radar screen over the last few days, and then we'll dig into some of the deeper issues. Certainly, the one big beautiful bill is floating around out there. That's going to be a topic. It's it's only $1.5 trillion legislative package. Probably not the impact that the fiscal hawks in the GOP were looking for. They were looking for some spending cuts. This is going to add about between 2.5 and $5.5 trillion over the next 10 years to the deficit. So not what was anticipated by a lot of folks. And even Mr. Elon Musk has criticized it, which big brouhaha down in the administration. So that's a big one. Trump came out with a rescissions package, a $9.4 billion rescissions package. That is, the aim of that is to reduce discretionary spending within the government. Some of the key targets there are the NPR, PBS, the public broadcasting folks, some USAID and African Development Foundation grants to the tune of about $8.3 billion. So, he's trying to end taxpayer support for, let's be honest, for some political reasons. He thinks these are institutions that do not support the conservative movement, and he's going after them. So he's trying to cut those out, and certainly doing it under the guise of reducing some spending. Mike Johnson is a little upset because the DOGE cuts that have been going on since Trump took office by Mr. Musk, who, by the way, now is going to be exiting out of that role. Those DOGE cuts have yet to be codified in Congress. So I think it's got a lot of people asking, was this a big waste of time? Certainly caused a lot of consternation on the other side of the aisle, caused a lot of negative press on what DOGE was doing, how it was doing it. And, in the end, is any of the work that they did to try and eliminate waste, will any of that actually work its way into the federal bureaucracy, which is tough, and again, I'm not here to get, political. I want to play, both sides of that aisle and really just look at what's good for trading. But, it does get interesting when, how do you evaluate, and this is, always a huge topic, how do you evaluate the impact of administrative policies when you get a new, when a president comes in, whether it's Republican, Democrat, when they come in, how do you actively and honestly evaluate the impact of their policies? And I want to know how, because that can influence how we move forward in the future, and what is the right way, and what is the right thing to do. And when, so far what I've seen is a lot of the policies, and I'm not going to say they are good or bad, but a lot of the policies that have been implemented by the administration have been stymied by activist judges. So what is really the impact of the policies? To some degree, we don't know, because they've not been fully implemented. We understand the impact of the talk and the rumors, which, by the way, we love to trade. That's awesome. But what is the overall impact on the economy? And certainly when we get into the discussion on tariffs, we'll see that a lot of Trump was relying on to make up for tax cuts and to cut deficit, growth was going to be through tariffs, and a lot of that now has been kiboshed. So it's again a bit of an upheaval going on, and certainly when Doge claims that I think they said $175 billion in potential savings, but if that is not codified by Congress, it's not really going to do much good. Other big news: Trump has ordered chip designers to halt sales to China. That's going to directly impact semiconductor design firms, including Cadence, Synopsys, Siemens, some of the big ones, who are going to have to stop sales to one of the largest consumers of chips in the world. And this is part of a broader national security strategy that the Trump administration has been implementing. I was talking with my good friend, a hell of a good trader, Hans Albrecht, this morning, and he pointed out that despite that move, NVIDIA is still on fire. So it could be good for some chip companies that have been embraced by the administration. I think you've been seeing some of this moving towards the U.S. This is part of that strategy. We want to build up that U.S. supply chain of chip manufacturing, and we're doing it under the guise of national security concerns. Same thing with like rare earth production, Mountain Pass, USA Rare Earth, which those stocks have been depressed a little bit, and the realities of politics kicked in. You can't have supplies completely cut off, which is what those tariffs are doing. When 130% tariffs were on some of those rare earth materials, and China was then weaponizing and saying, well, if you're going to tariff us, we're just not going to ship anything. And then the realization set in when, I think the number I saw was 45 to 50 Fortune 500 companies, 45 to 50, spoke to the administration and said, and this is coming from the CEOs of some of the domestic rare earth companies that I talked to. If that supply had been cut off by China, there were Fortune 500 companies that were going to go out of business within 6 to 7 months, or be in a lot of trouble financially if they did not get those rare earth supplies. So the reality of the situation kicked in. People said, why did those tariffs go from 130% down to 25%? It was the reality of maintaining supply chains for manufacturing in the United States of critical minerals, not just to defense, but to America's industrial base. So sometimes realities kick in, and again, we'll talk about that in a minute. But so NVIDIA and some others, that are trying to do a big push to help create a domestic supply chain in the U.S., they're doing pretty well. So thanks for that tip, Hans. And we've also had some good consumer confidence numbers rebounded in May. So consumer confidence was high. We still have, because of a lot of uncertainty going on with budgets, et cetera, we still got a lot of market volatility. But and a lot of that is too with those supply chain concerns that we've seen. Whenever you have manufacturing facing supply chain concerns, that gets a little inflationary. Sure, first quarter GDP contracted a bit, and that's deflationary. But all these things tend to offset, and again, the market goes, "What the hell is going on? What the heck's going on?" Sorry, and we're off to the races of volatility. So we're still trying to get our arms around exactly what is going to come out of this budget process. And Trump, with the tariffs and some other things being shut down, he's not happy with Congress. Obviously, he thinks that they're both the courts and Congress are exercising a little too much authority over what he can do. He wants to do what he wants to do. So he's actually looking at some different legal challenges to try and broaden out his scope of executive powers. The one thing popped up this week, he's looking at the 1974 Impound Control Act, which would give him greater authority to withhold congressionally approved funds. So Congress can approve spending on something, and Trump can go, no, we're gonna hold on to that money. So there are legal challenges in the works, and we're going to follow those as they mature. But if we look, tariffs, that's the big one. Big decision yesterday by the courts. The International Court of Trade ruled that Trump exceeded his authority in implementing the International Emergency Economic Powers Act by imposing the Liberation Day tariffs. He exceeded his authority under that act. And so the court shut it down. And this is a permanent shutdown of the tariffs that were implemented under that umbrella. So these are gone. They included a 10% baseline duty on most imports, from China, Canada, and Mexico, and higher rates, in particular on those countries, but across the board, baseline 10% duty on most imports. The China, Canada, and Mexico ones were a little elevated above that 10%. So all of that is being shut down. So what, let's do a little rundown. What actually occurred with that court decision? Well, the 10% global tariff, it was effective. It had been in effect since April 5th. That's gone. 25% additional, boosted tariffs on Canada and Mexico, gone. They were there trying to, weaponize the, forcing Canada and Mexico to help out with drug trafficking and illegal immigration. Those are gone. Additional 20% tariff on Chinese goods. The Trump administration said that was to try and stem the tide of fentanyl. Gone. And, and then there's some, there were some exemptions in play, such as the, duty-free treatment of low-value imports from China. Those are sidelined as well. Now, tariffs aren't going away. There's still some in effect, plenty in effect. And don't forget, Trump's going to challenge these in the shutdown in court as well. So he's going to try and boost up to a higher court. But there are still some pretty impactful tariffs in place. So steel and aluminum tariffs are still live. They were imposed under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act. So those are still live. And obviously that has a huge impact on manufacturing, particularly the automotive sector. And in fact, it's kind of a double down because there's automobile and part tariff specific ones that are in play under Section 232 as well, and that's certainly going to have an impact on the short-term cost of production for the automobile industry, and certainly could hurt long-term the competitiveness of the automobile industry on a global scale, which, as we know, you're getting a lot more competition from Chinese automobiles. Europe's always pretty competitive, so that will hurt domestic manufacturers, GM, Ford. I don't expect them to have any pops anytime soon as a result of this. There's also a 25% tariff on goods that import Venezuelan oil. That was an executive order that Trump had put in. So, that could certainly impact some of your big oil companies that have relied on supplies from the Venezuelan nation. So there are still things that are in play. So the short-term effects of this, though, that court decision, we should see a good market reaction out of that. Those tariffs are, they were definitely causing some market hesitation. So I think in the short term, we should see the NASDAQ, S&P get a little pop from those tariffs going away. And it should help consumer prices, because, obviously cost of goods coming in will be cheaper. Long-term effect, that's going to impact the budget. It could, it's going to equate to, over time, if the budget is implemented and there's not that offset in spending, that's going to have certainly a negative economic impact on the U.S. And it's also going to, hopefully in the short term, create more stable trade relations with foreign countries. But again, Trump is looking for other ways to get around it. He's going to have he's going to file court actions, particularly under Section 122 of the Trade Act of '74. He's going to try and get around those. Hopefully, he's not going to do it by declaring a national emergency, because that will just be a massive brouhaha on Capitol Hill. But that is an option. He can declare a national emergency, say the tariffs are necessary because of that, and he's going to go right around that court decision. I hope he does not do that, and I have no problem with him challenging a court decision higher up. But let's do it the right way, not try and just skirt around it. So I'm a constitutional guy, big believer. We have a tripartite government, and those three branches are supposed to exercise control over the other ones. And certainly when you see this, particularly the International Court of Trade coming out like this, to me it's a good check on executive power. Maybe it's not a full stop, but sometimes pumping the brakes, taking a deep breath, making sure we're doing everything within the confines of the Constitution is not a bad thing. So that's where we are with tariffs. They're not going away. We're still going to get money from them. We're still going to bug my friend Hans up in Canada about them. But it certainly will have both a short-term and long-term economic impact. And as we mentioned, the one thing that it will touch is the big, beautiful Bill Act that Trump is trying to get passed. It's his massive tax and spend bill, and it passed the House, sitting in the Senate. Some of the strongest, the most vocal opposition has been from GOP senators who think there needs to be a lot more cutting out of that bill of spending to keep that long-term deficit impact in check. And again, more pressure given the decision last night from the trade court. So if we look at the biggest expenditures of that bill, well, it's a home run for defense spending. There's a $150 billion increase in defense spending in that bill. If you're, and a lot of that's going to go to very large weapon systems, very, big ships. The Ingersoll Rands of the world are going to love it. All the big East Coast, shipbuilders are going to love the increase in that bill. Border security, about $70 billion for border security, building walls. We'll call it infrastructure. We're going to have what they call the Trump account, which would be $1,000 in tax-favored savings for every child born between 2024 and 2028. There will be cuts to Medicaid and the SNAP program. Not really cuts; it's just they're going to revamp eligibility, which will result in less people receiving those benefits, but it's not necessarily a cut to the spending itself. And then he's also going after the clean energy tax credits that popped up during the Biden administration very hard. And those include credits for electric vehicles, renewable power projects, and they're going to be phased out over a couple of years. So that could have an impact on the buying of Teslas, not for the reasons we've had over the last 4 months, but that could have a increased impact on electric vehicle sales, and certainly that will hurt the big the GMs and the Fords of the world that are trying to break into that market more heavily, compounded with their supply chain problems. There's going to be no on the renewable side. Yes, some of those cuts are being slowed down. At the same time, though, the administration has increased approval. So the offshore wind project around New York that had been shut down during the Biden administration, that's now been greenlit again. So that project is going to get up and running, to the dismay of a lot of very large homeowners in the Hamptons. But that is going to move forward. But certainly, for some smaller projects that we're relying on tax credits that could hamper those kind of greenfield projects breaking ground. Some of the big tax policy changes in the bill: permanent extension of the 2017 tax cuts, which is meant to put more money in people's pockets. No federal income tax on tips or overtime pay. That could be huge. Certainly, help support GDP spending. Is it going to be inflationary? We'll wait to see that. Child tax credit increases are going to occur, and the SALT deduction cap was raised from $10,000 to $40,000 in a nod to trying to get senatorial votes from senators in high tax states, which there are, believe it or not, a few. So some folks in California, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey were really lobbying hard to get that SALT tax cap raised. So that will be kicking in. But again, people are concerned that it's going to raise those deficits. So should be stimulating in the short term. I think if the budget passes, certainly, the cuts will be stimulating. The growth in deficits won't occur for it'll occur over the course of 10 years. And I think a lot of people say, we'll figure it out as we go. And, maybe we can figure out other ways to cut that down. Certainly, workforce productivity could increase. I think it's slowed down so much with COVID. But now if you can work for tips and work for, overtime, why would you not go all in if you're not getting taxed on that? It's just, you just got a huge bump in your paycheck. And, I'm a little hopeful for that, because quite honestly, I don't know about the rest of you out there, but the service I've had from my local bartenders have been atrocious since people aren't motivated to work for tips like they used to be. So, I think you'll get a little productivity increase from that, and certainly defense is going to get a massive boost. Defense and infrastructure, but the debt's going to go up. We do have to live with that, and that will that led to the Moody's downgrade, and we will have to suffer with that. And certainly, on the clean energy side, Tesla or Next Energy, or some of these ones that we're working with these clean energy tax credits, we could see a little stymie on that. So anyway, it's still in the Senate. It's still being debated. We'll see what comes out of it. But, certainly everybody at Option Pit, we're keeping an eye on how that money is going to move, where it's going to move to, and we're going to try and get in front of it to, before the rest of the world realizes how that's going to impact trading in the markets. Some other things that are kind of highlighted lately: U.S. government did approve a Nippon Steel acquisition of U.S. Steel, a huge $14 billion acquisition, and that saw obviously U.S. Steel stock take a nice big jump. It's supposed to create 70,000 jobs, so it should have a very positive impact on the broad domestic steel industry, and all boats rise with the tide. So I think that could offset some of the the negative consequences of those aluminum and steel tariffs that we discussed earlier by seeing this this renewed fervor in the U.S. steel industry, which had not had a lot of excitement for a long time. You got the U.S. housing finance chief. He is pushing the Federal Reserve hard for rate cuts. They want to try and stimulate the housing market. Housing rates have just been sky high and have not shown any signs of coming down. So there's a lot of pressure on the Fed there. Trump's been pressuring the Fed to lower rates because he wants to restructure debt. And so I think there's a little of that going on behind the scenes, but they're doing it under the pressure of trying to stimulate the housing market. We'll see if we'll see where that goes. If they do lower rates, obviously that's going to be very good for the home sales and home building sector. Home builders like D.R. Horton, Lennar, they should benefit from lower rates like that, because you will see building stimulus. Should also help mortgage lenders. If we see a pop in activity. So, like a Rocket Mortgage, some of these mortgage lenders that we can trade that are out there. But again, it's going to be interesting because, this debate's going on. You're getting some Republican pushback. You're going to see some fighting in the Senate. And on top of that, you do have, the fact that Musk came out and was very critical of the bill and the impact of this bill on deficits. That was a pretty high profile criticism. And so we're going to see if how much influence that might have on the floor debate. Pretty silent in all this have been the Democrats. You just haven't heard much out of them. I think they're letting the Republicans negotiate against themselves on this one, and then they'll probably step in. Schumer's a pretty crafty guy, and he's going to bide his time and then step in at the end and kind of force his hand when everybody thinks the bill's about to get wrapped up and everything's good. He's going to step in and try and assert some authority and maybe put a little Democratic pressure on some of their initiatives. He is going to be careful though, because he was one of the biggest advocates for raising that SALT tax cap, and he does not want to endanger that for the state of New York, because it'll have a huge impact on his voting base. So that's what I'm seeing. That's my week in review, and like I said, there's still a lot to be determined of the full impact of these bills and the tariffs, but we should certainly see some stimulus in the short term and some pretty, some good trading opportunities. But again, we always trade. Markets up, markets down. We always find things to trade, and with capital gains. Andrew and I have been doing a lot of good things with defense, nuclear power. As I said, the rare earth industry has been a little frustrating, but that's going to pop back too for us. So that's what I've got. It was great spending time with you, and I appreciate it. So Frank Gregory, Tuesday, 10:30 on the East Coast, or Thursday, sorry, 10:30 on the East Coast. I'm a little scatterbrained. My daughter's got prom tonight, so I'm thinking about how to terrorize her date. Anyway, hope all is well, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.